Now, so Germany caught the eye over the weekend, beating Portugal. Very happy to say Rob Daly joins us. He presents the official Euro 2020 radio show and podcast, covers a lot of German football as well. Rob, great to have you on. How's things?
Good, mate. How are you, Joe?
Yeah, very well. So the Germans, written off, I think, by a lot of people after the French game, coupled with their poor performance pre-tournament, and suddenly, game 2 against Portugal, a goal down, they turn it on. So this was pretty impressive.
Certainly was. I mean, I came into this tournament feeling like Jogi Low should not be the national team coach anymore, because, you look back to the World Cup success, that's now 7 years ago. That's a long time in football. I felt they should have made the change, and they were pretty stale at the 2018 World Cup going out in the group stage, and we saw in that opening game against France, they were ultimately outclassed. They had a good spell early in the second half, but France could have won by a greater margin. So I'll admit I was completely surprised and blown away by the performance against Portugal. There was a lot more energy in the play. I felt Portugal didn't address the very quick switching of the ball between wing backs and into wide areas, which was their ultimate downfall. We obviously saw Robin Gosens make a name for himself. We have seen him in the Champions League, but make a name for himself on the international stage. It was a brilliant performance, and even when they're not that great, and I think back to even the 2002 World Cup, which I'm sure you remember, Joe, as well, when Germany sort of blustered their way to the final of the World Cup. They weren't a great side then and got that far. So you never know with them. And they're in a position now whereby they know a win against Hungary takes them into the knockout. So ultimately, they are in a good position.
There was something so toothless about them against France, which was really concerning. Now, admittedly, France are obviously a better team than Portugal, and the Semedo Rafa Silva effort for one of the Gosens goals was fairly deplorable in the second half. So all those points notwithstanding, this was still a much better German performance. There was energy and there was a real attacking verve. Like, even if you think of the Robin Gosens offside goal early on, like, forget Kimmich, who's right wing back, putting in the cross. It was Ginter who had pushed right up, one of the centre backs putting the cross in. Kimmich's further up inside him. They're creating overloads. It's real let's go for it kind of approach from Germany. And like I said, against France, we just didn't see any of that.
Well, it's interesting because Jogi Low came out after the France game, which they lost 1-0, and admitted we focused too much going into that game on the defensive aspects, on being solid at the back. And maybe there was a little bit of an inferiority complex going into that game because France were the favourites, still are the favourites probably for Euro 2020. They brought Karim Benzema into that front line with Antoine Griezmann and Kylian Mbappe. And maybe there was a little bit of, it'd be brutal to lose this opening game. It's just about getting out the group really at this stage. Let's be honest, we can analyse all these performances in isolation, but the head coaches know, get to 4-6 points you throw, basically. But they probably were too defensive, and they were certainly too slow in possession. There seemed to be a reluctance to play the pacier players in the team, certainly in attack. Yes, Serge Gnabry was starting, but no Leroy Sané, no Timo Werner. But it all clicked against the Portuguese. I thought Semedo, I really don't rate him at right back. I can't understand why Wolves spent all that money to bring him to the club. I just don't see what it's all about. I know João Cancelo's injured, but like you mentioned, they kept getting caught out by Robin Gosens down the left-hand side. Who was outstanding, who was superb. And suddenly, I think there's a bit of belief and interest in the national team again. Since the 2018 World Cup, I think there's generally been apathy towards the national team in Germany.
Tell us a bit more about Gosens. As you said, he's played in the Champions League, so this isn't complete unknown, but he's grabbing attention across Europe over the weekend in a way he hasn't previously in his career.
Yeah, this is the thing with international football, major tournaments. You are subjected to a level of fame that, even the Premier League or Champions League can't really garner you. But Gosens' career is unorthodox. He was in low-level football. He was in the Netherlands. He came through in the Netherlands. I think his mother's Dutch, and that's how he ended up out there, came up through the Eredivisie. And he's a player that I think many German football fans, because he didn't come through the traditional academy systems of the Bundesliga and come through a club like Bayern or Borussia Dortmund, he was relatively unknown. But they all know him now. He even has a book out in Germany. I was told by a friend of mine today, Archie Rentat, who's a German-based football journalist. So he's extremely popular. He's become a bit of a cult figure. And he doesn't have the airs and graces. I say airs and graces. Maybe he isn't as polished in a media sense as other footballers. He's a bit rough and ready and is a bit more honest. I think he's charmed the German public. So left back's been a big issue for them as well. It's been a problem for a long time. They've tried loads of different players in that position, and it seems now finally it suits him. He plays left wing back for Atalanta, but it seems they found a solution to that problem.
No, they sure have. Some of the old dogs for the hard road. So Mats Hummels, as we know, back in the squad, very much the leader at Dortmund, and Thomas Muller back as well, both returning in May after this 2-year exile, binned after the 2018 World Cup and a poor Nations League campaign. And yet Muller's form in particular for Bayern was just difficult to ignore, especially when things weren't going especially well on the national front for Jogi Low. And I just thought, again, he was so impressive in that very Thomas Muller way. Like the Havertz goal on 51 minutes, that was a Thomas Muller finish. Muller was busy back 10 yards deeper, giving the pass out wide to Gosens. And, we're talking, 100-plus German caps. He's got his 10 Bundesliga titles, 2 Champions Leagues, 2014 World Cup winner, 10 goals in the World Cup, which puts him 3 ahead of any other active player, Ronaldo included. Links up with Gnabry at Munich. I mean, he's still really doing it, and his technique at times can appear unorthodox or a little ungainly, or it can be off balance. And yet, I watched, Rob, just before talking to you, all of his 18 assists and 11 goals in the Bundesliga this season. And I know last season, the previous season, 1920, he broke the record for most assists. He's still playing brilliant, brilliant football over the last 2 years. And I mean, tournament football, he is just made for it. He's got an injury, I think, at the moment, next couple of games, potentially. But Muller back in this German side. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so it was obviously the thinking from Jogi Low was off the back of the 2018 World Cup to move on from the group that won in 2014. But I felt it was too cutthroat. It was over the top. Certainly to disregard Thomas Muller. Now, Muller has evolved, I'd argue from Euro 2016, a tournament where he couldn't score, he evolved into more of a creator than a goal scorer. So if the perception was he was on the decline, maybe that was the case, but he's come back and he had to be picked. Those assist statistics undoubtedly helped by the fact he plays with Robert Lewandowski, who can put away any kind of chance, but those two link up beautifully at Bayern. But he's also a leader in the group. Yes, it looks like he's definitely missing the Hungary game, I think. And his knee injury means he may miss a round of 16 encounter as well, should they get through that group of death. But he is he's a personality like no other. And more you speak to international players, especially when you're away for that length of time. Especially with the friendlies, you're away with a group for 6, 7, 8 weeks if you go all the way. You need personalities. You need guys who are going to lift you when you're feeling on a bit of an off day. And Thomas Muller is that guy. You might well be aware of his nickname, Joe, that his nickname is Radio Muller, because he's always on air, always talking. During training, during matches, he's always in the ears of his teammates, even when they're playing darts at the training ground. He's the one who picks up a megaphone and commentates on the darts for all the other players. He just basically doesn't shut up. And I think Jogi Low has loved having him back in the team. I think there was a climb down as well, wasn't there? Let's face it. You say, I'm going to bin off 3 of Germany's truly iconic players in Boateng, Hummels and Muller. It's a big statement. It annoyed Bayern at the time. It was a massive call. But ultimately, like we've seen with Deschamps and Benzema and Rabiot, sometimes you need to just say, maybe I got that wrong. I need to bring them back in. And despite the fact he might miss the next 2 games, he's been a key member of that squad. And it's funny you were talking about Kai Havertz there. He's been talked about as the next Thomas Muller, in that he drifts in those sort of spaces that aren't conventional positions. He scores goals from the edge of the area. Looks a bit sort of languid and awkward at times, but the pair were combining beautifully the other day. And, if they are to go all the way, Thomas Muller, I'm sure, will be a key component of that.
Yeah. He's always been a really interesting player, Muller, and one that's difficult to pin down. In his own words, when you were talking about his nickname there, I thought you were going to say Ramduter. So in his own words, he said, I don't enjoy being classed as a striker. I don't see myself as one, which, by the way, is good going for the guy who led the German attack in their World Cup winning campaign in 2014. But he said, I like to be active in the space behind the opposition midfielder. That's where I can hurt the opponent most of all. It's a mix between a striker and a midfielder. I'm a Ramduter. It's all about instinct. And so I looked up Ramduter. It means the space interpreter.
Yes, and that's the nickname that's being labelled at Kai Havertz now. He's now they're talking about him inheriting that exact title. So that is where he's best. And, when Bayern signed Felipe Coutinho, you may remember, you were like, uh-oh, is Thomas Muller going to lose his place in the team? That year that they signed Coutinho on a year-long deal. By the time that Niko Kovac was sacked in November, Thomas Muller was back in the team and was crucial in them winning the Champions League that year. So you just can't keep a good player down. And I think he's still only 31. It feels like he's been around since the 1970s, doesn't it? So,
I feel like he's 40. It's incredible how young he is, yeah. So he's a Ramduder. They don't just have like a number 10 in Germany. No, it has to be the space interpreter.
I don't know. I think that's specific for him, I think.
It might be. But yeah, no, I think he invented it for himself almost.
Oh, did it? Oh, there you go. But yeah, they're big into the numbers. You say he's a number 6, a number 8, a number 9. They talk in those sort of terms. So, but he's a unique player. Maybe he deserves a unique nickname.
So as you mentioned, we're seeing Havertz blossom. What about Gnabry then? Is he there to score lots of goals? Is he there to create? Are you disappointed with Gnabry so far? He hasn't, caught the eye maybe in the way Müller and Havertz have thus far. Admittedly, only 2 games in.
I'm not a big fan of him as a centre forward, to be honest, Joe. He did it in the game where they got absolutely whipped by Spain, the 6-0 at the back end of last year. It was Gnabry as the striker, Werner one side, and I forget, was it Leroy Sané the other side, something like that. I'm not a huge fan of it, but I suppose the idea is that Havertz and Müller will not stretch teams, whereas Serge Gnabry will. I'm just so interested into the Timo Werner situation as well at Chelsea and with the German national team, that there's a reluctance to play him through the middle probably as a byproduct of the fact that his finishing can be off. But I do think Gnabry is one of the best wingers in the world. I like seeing him out wide. But we've seen teams enjoy great successes with players up front playing as a centre forward and not scoring. And I think really the French national team, to be honest, when I say that, I think of 98, Stefan Guivarc'h. I think of 2018, Olivier Giroud. Neither scored at major tournaments. They went on to win those respective tournaments. So it isn't inconceivable that they'll keep Gnabry up front for the whole thing and go very far indeed.
On Timo Werner, because I suspect, like myself, a lot of us weren't watching the Bundesliga week in, week out, and we did see him catch the eye at times in the Champions League. But at Chelsea this year, he just really doesn't look like a natural finisher and doesn't look like he's going to become one. I'm sure stranger things have happened, but he just doesn't inspire confidence when he's in on goal the way others do. You sort of knew if Ruud van Nistelrooy was in on goal, he was going to finish. Werner doesn't seem to be in that mould. In your time covering German football, like, what's your read on Werner as a finisher?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, Joe. So back in, I think, 2015, 2016, I went down to Stuttgart to watch them play. And Werner was a player at Stuttgart at the time before he joined RB Leipzig. And what was so thrilling about him at the time, and he was being hyped as the next superstar of German football then, was his ability to break into space, to get into great shooting positions, but not score. So you just felt, okay, if he sorts the finishing out, he's going to be unbelievable.
Okay.
Then he goes to RB Leipzig and does. He did sort the finishing out. It's not like that problem lingered. There were games, certainly I covered, hat-trick he scored away at Borussia Mönchengladbach. You could find the highlights of it online. His finishing was effortless. It was like, Joe, honestly, there were times where, and he had been streaky in the back, his final season in Germany. Maybe there'd be the odd run of 4 or 5 games where he wouldn't score. But his finishing did look natural. He looked very comfortable, getting to a shooting position. That sort of, it feels lazy to say Thierry Henry position. Your left side of the area, you shoot with your right, and you just knew he was going to score most of them. He was not coming to the Premier League, in my mind, as an Alvaro Morata kind of character. In my head, he'd fixed his finishing. A bit like, if I'm honest, when I saw Mo Salah at Basel. For some reason, I covered Basel when he was there. And you're like, oh, if he could only finish, what a player he'd be. And then he did sort that out. Mo Salah used to miss loads of chances. And then Werner seemed to sort it out. So this actually feels like a regression to me in a sense. I still feel that he could become that player, but maybe he isn't the centre forward. At Leipzig, he was often deployed in the 2 with a big Danish striker play for the national team right now, Yusuf Poulsen, or alongside Patrick Schick, actually, in the guy who scored from the halfway line for the Czechs a couple of seasons back. Maybe in a front two is where he's best, but not many teams play with two up front anymore. So I don't know. I don't know if we'll see it in the Premier League, but honestly, mate, he was scoring for fun in Germany. So I don't know what's happened. Yeah.
Maybe he rediscovers it. Let's see how the Germans go over the next couple of weeks. Rob, super stuff, covers a lot of German football, but currently presenting the official Euro 2020 radio show and podcast. Rob, I know with a few technical difficulties as well, so thanks a million for enduring all that and coming through for us. Thanks, man.
Pleasure always. Speak soon, guys.